I'm Kermit Carter of Flowers by the Sea. Welcome to our salvia demonstration gardens. Today we're going to show you about pruning, that is, Salvia elegans. In particular, one of the cultivars that we really appreciate, Salvia elegans Tangerine. Now, the botanists out there may say that's not really a Salvia elegans, but we call it that because everyone else does, and I think that's probably the way it should be. Wonderful tangerine smells, red flowers through most of the season. If you're in zone 9, it'll bloom 12 months of the year. Zone 8, it dies to the ground. Zone 7, hardy. If you're in zone 6, sorry, you're gonna have to wait for another plant to learn about pruning, but the principle holds. This is a semi-woody herbaceous perennial. We're going to take the wood to the ground and allow the new growth to come through. So come on down and take a look. We've got 3 plants here. These are 2 years old. They were planted from the 3.5-inch pots that we send to you when you order one. I wanted a nice big clump that would be attractive to hummingbirds and bees. This plant was cut down 2 weeks ago. These other 2 have not yet been pruned. So I've got my Felcos. You can use a smaller pruning shear if you want to get in and do some of the delicate work. I rarely have time to be delicate on things like this, and salvias are pretty tough plants. So let's go right on in. You can see these older woody stems, and I'll cut one out. Take a look at that. Now, oh, I'm cutting all the flowers off, but that woody stem is, with it long internode length, is not going to really provide much flowering this year. This should be pruned and taken off and gotten out of the way. And you can just go in and go to town. If you really like to prune, here we go. Now, some people would mow this down entirely, take this entirely to the ground so that only this freshest new growth would come up. I'm a little wimpy. I like to leave some of these things. I think the plant recovers and blooms faster, but it certainly is quicker if you just want to come down and mow down everything that you see. What's right and what's wrong? I don't think there is a right and wrong here. So as you see, as I start working through and taking these older stems off, we're really opening up the plant. We're allowing light to come down in. There, especially those of you who are in summer rainfall areas in the southeast of the country, for example, are going to have far fewer disease problems when the plants are cut down because there's not so much water that's going to be held in the center. And the fresh growth is always more floriferous. So you see what I'm taking are these old woody stems. By the way, this makes a delicious tea. I think it's best as an iced tea, but people use it as a hot tea as well. Fresh or dried, it's really good. A little bit of honey, a squeeze of lemon. I might have to stop doing this and have a cup of tea. Some people have a really difficult time pruning. They say, oh no, the plant is going away and it's never going to grow back. But really, the best thing that you can do with a lot of different salvias, but especially this type, and remember, this is Salvia elegans Tangerine. By the way, it smells wonderful. And Salvia, it's a semi-woody herbaceous perennial. It forms these woody stems in climates that are mild, otherwise it just dies entirely to the ground. And it really benefits from a careful pruning. Now, look at this. This is new growth, but it's old, it's lanky, and it's kind of floppy. So I'm going to cut that off because it's the new, sturdy, dark green, fresh growth from the base that's really going to give me the maximum flower power. And it's not going to be long before these stop flowering. Now, you might ask, why did I do one and leave the others? And there's several reasons for that. One, quite frankly, is time. It's a small nursery. We don't always have time to do things exactly when we want. But the other thing is, we have young Anna's hummingbirds right now, and they really love this plant and come in and drink the nectar. If I cut the whole thing down, I'd be depriving them of their entire food source. So by taking it a little bit at a time, I leave them the food source. These will be up and flowering before I finish cutting those. From the hummingbird standpoint, it's a good thing. And would be a lot better off if people thought more about hummingbirds and bees than they often do. All right. If you don't want this plant to spread, which it does gently, you can take all the new growth off around the perimeter. Notice out here how it's spreading through the duff and mulch and coming up, and if you don't want that, just prune it out of the way. You could also dig those up. There'll be a few roots underneath, and they'll make nice gifts from your neighbors. Some nursery people wouldn't tell you that. They'd say, buy one of our plants. But I'll tell you, you can dig it up and give it to your neighbor as well. So we're starting to come to some degree of completion on this plant. It's really up to you how much time you want to spend taking each individual older stem off. As I said, some people literally cut it off and mow it off at ground level, and that works perfectly fine. Takes a little bit longer to come back, but really not that much. Some of those taller stems here, you know, there's a few flowers on them, but they're really not much. I'm going to cut them off and just let some new stuff come up. There probably would have been fewer of those had I done this a couple of weeks ago when I did this plant, but I wanted to wait for the hummers. Sharp pruning shears are important, of course. One of these days soon we'll show you how to sharpen your pruners. That's not bad. One could take a little extra time and make it look extraordinarily elegant. If it was in a container by my front door, I might. But at this point, I think that's pretty good. So here's the plant that needs pruning. Here's what it looks like a couple of weeks after pruning. And, of course, I've got encroachment issues here. And here is the newly pruned. So Salvia elegans Tangerine, hardy into zone 7, a hummingbird magnet, fragrant, a great thing to use in iced tea or hot tea, and I'm told an excellent plant to use for flavoring baked goods as well. So it's hard to recognize, considering how small it was last time we saw it. This is the Salvia elegans Tangerine that we pruned nearly to the ground just a couple of months ago. This Salvia nilotica was actually there, but it wasn't flowering. And look, it's what, 3.5 feet tall, about the maximum size that it gets. This is the one we pruned, along with the one that had already been pruned. The two have sort of merged together. Here's the one that we didn't prune, and as you see, we never got around to pruning it. Look how ugly this is compared to this beautiful new growth. So in the spring, this is definitely going to get cut down next year. Don't feel badly, all gardeners have these issues. So the results of our pruning of the Salvia elegans Tangerine, here it is. I hope yours look every bit as good or better.